on? Oh, right. Good afternoon, everybody. I guess I should say bonjour, mesdames et messieurs. Merci d'être ici. That's honestly probably all the French you're going to get out of me until until the end. Thank you. Until the end, when I say merci beaucoup and bonne journée, right? So when you guys hear those words, then you know the keynote is over. Um, I didn't understand much about what was going on the stage here. There were two things that I got though. Number one, of course, I didn't win any of the drawings, which is really kind of unfortunate. But number two, I heard the word chocolat. Is there is there chocolate going on around here somewhere that I don't know about? I'm actually kind of being serious about that, but okay. Um, all right, oops. We're here to talk about, how did that get so far? We're here to talk about hurricanes, believe it or not. We're going to talk about hurricanes. A couple things you should know about my presentations. I like to keep them extremely informal if we can. We've got kind of a larger audience here, which is great. Thank you everybody for showing up. Which is maybe going to make question and answer a little bit more difficult. I usually like to take questions as I go through my presentation. Um, so we'll see how we do with that. I definitely have some time reserved at the end for question and answer, so hopefully we'll get an opportunity to address maybe some of your questions. But the hope here is that we are going to have a little bit of fun. I did get the dreaded hour after lunch slot, right? So I know you guys are going to be slipping into a food coma here or whatever. So I'll try and keep you interested. So let's talk about hurricanes for a little bit. I don't know if you know this or not. Has anyone heard of the game show Let's Make a Deal? Actually, anyone heard of the game show Let's Make a Deal? Yeah, okay, good. What you might not know about the game show Let's Make a Deal is it was actually invented and run by a Canadian, Monty Hall. Monty Hall's a Canadian. It's maybe the worst kept secret in America that all the best game shows are run by Canadians. I don't know if you know this or not. But Monty Hall was, I think he's, I think he's from Winnipeg, right? So maybe he's not a real Canadian then, right? Everybody knows all the real Canadians are from Quebec, right? Um, but Monty Hall, he invented this game show, Let's Make a Deal. He started running it in the '60s and '70s, and the idea of the Let's Make a Deal game show was Monty Hall would go around and he would randomly pick contestants from the audience to play these games. And that's why the audience members would always dress up in these really kind of outlandish costumes because they wanted to get Monty Hall's attention and they wanted to be picked to play these games. Um, we're actually going to play. I want to play one of the Monte Hall games with you, one of the Let's Make a Deal games with you. So what he would do for this game, what he would do is he would pick a couple people at random or one person at random, and he would show these contestants. He would direct the contestants' attention to the stage, and he would show the contestants on the stage. There would be three closed doors. Okay, three closed doors. Behind one of those closed doors was a brand new car. Behind the other two closed doors, behind each of the other two closed doors, was a goat. And the objective of the game was really, really simple. The contestant had to just pick which one of those closed doors had the brand new car behind it. Okay? So what do you guys think? Should we play Let's Make a Deal? Let's play Let's Make a Deal. So I have my assistant at the back of the room there, Todd. Everybody say hi to Todd. He's running this for me. Okay, so this is an example. This website is an example of what the Let's Make a Deal game looks like. And by the way, those of you who know the answer to this, please don't give it away. Don't shout out the answer, whatever. So we're going to play Let's Make a Deal. There are three closed doors here. We have to decide. We have to choose which one of those closed doors has the new car behind it. So what do you guys think? Which door should we choose? Two. All right. Two was the first one I heard. So I'm going to have Todd go here. Well, and before you do, Todd, just so you know, before he clicks on two, what's going to happen is once the contestant has chosen one of the doors, what Monty Hall would do then is he would reveal what's behind one of the other doors. And he will reveal one of the other doors that has the goat. So you'll see in just a second here, when we click on two, either door number one or door number three is going to open up, and there's going to be a goat behind there. Okay, so Todd, if you go and click on door number two. right? And there we go. So door number 3 opened up, and there's our goat. Okay. So now comes the let's make a deal part of let's make a deal. At this point, what Monty Hall would do is he would turn to the contestant and he would say, given the fact that you've chosen door number 2, and given the fact that I just revealed door number 3 here to show door number 3 has a goat, right? I'm going to give you the opportunity to change your answer if you want to. You can either stick with your original choice of door number 2, or you now have the opportunity to switch to door number 1 if you want to. So what do you guys think? What's the best strategy here? What's the best winning strategy? I'm hearing both. So do you guys, I mean, the question is, do you think the fact that he revealed door number 3 helps us or hurts us? Does the fact that we got this information of the door number 3 revealed, should that warrant us changing our answer, or is this really kind of smoke and mirrors, sleight of hand type of thing? That is, he's trying to trick us into changing our answer because we originally chose the right door. So let's do an informal poll. And again, if you know the answer, please don't shout it out to your friends or whatever. How many people think we should stick with our original answer, which is door number 2? Okay, quite a bit. How many people think that we should change? It looked like about two to 3, or two to 1, maybe. I think twice as many people want to stick with door number 2 than to change. Okay, so you guys are going to hate me for this, but you have to stick to the end of the presentation to find out the real answer, right? This is the only way. This is the only way I can guarantee that you guys will stay around, so we can find out the answer. So a little bit later, I'm going to show you guys what the right answer is. But I want you to make a mental note here of what your choice was. The reason that I like to start off with this example is, well, actually twofold. Number one is obviously Monty Hall here is asking us for a forecast. He's asking us to make a forecast in terms of where is that brand new car. Number two, probably a little bit more importantly, is when we're asked to make forecasts, and more importantly, when we are making our forecasts, our intuition can usually let us down. A lot of the stuff that I'm going to be talking about, or a lot of the stuff that you guys will encounter when you do forecasts for real, is it's counterintuitive to the point of being, it's unintuitive to the point of being counterintuitive. A lot of this stuff just does not intuitively make sense. But the good news is there are a lot of tools out there to help us make sense of some of this stuff. So let's get right into that. So Todd, if you can switch back to the presentation, please. Yeah, all right. So that was Monty Hall. So when we left off last time, I was actually, honestly, really probably the most surprising thing about me standing before you today is that I actually did a presentation here last year. Was anybody in that presentation? Anybody? Oh, thank you. Thank you. For the rest of you who weren't there, shame on you. Right? You should have been there. But the most important, I guess the most surprising thing is I actually got invited back. I didn't think that I would. So when we left off last time, and this is maybe a review for the people who were there before, I left you guys with this question, and that question was, what does a 19th century Yorkshire cotton industrialist have to do with a Manhattan Project? This is actually the real title of the presentation, by the way. This is what I really wanted it to be, but I'm not sure that anyone would come to a talk that was titled that or not. Did anybody Google it? Did anybody look up the answer to that? No? Okay, well that's all right. We'll come back to that one. But this is another question I want you to keep in the back of your mind. But as further review, just before we get into this, remember the first question that your customers are going to ask you once you start on work on something for them is, when will it be done? That's the question they're going to ask you. And when we talk about predictability, when we talk about forecasting, it's going to be usually answering this question. This is one of the most important questions that they're going to ask you. It's worse than that, though. For all of you who've been asked this question, when will it be done? It's worse than that because our customers are expecting this answer to be in a very, very, very specific form. Okay. When our customers ask us when will it be done, what is the form of the answer that they are looking for? A date. They're looking for a date or a number of days, right? And this is a classic example I like to give. So again, I apologize for the repeat for anybody. Let's say it's December 1st, which it's almost December 1st, right? Tomorrow is December 1st. So let's say it's December 1st, and we tell our customers that we're going to have something done for them in 30 days. When do you think your customers expect that item to be done, to be finished? December 31st, certainly by the end of the year. They're not sitting there thinking, you know what, there are the Christmas holidays in there, and nobody really works over the Christmas holidays. And there's some weekends in there too, so when they say 30 days, what they really mean is the middle of January. I guarantee that your customers are not doing that math in their head. So what your customers really care about is that date or number of days in terms of elapsed time. And so the radical thing that I suggest when we start talking about predictability and forecasting, the radical thing that I suggest is if what your customers care about is elapsed time, then that's exactly what we should be measuring. That's exactly what we should be measuring, and that's exactly what we should be tracking. In order to get that, you really only need two pieces of data. That's it. In order to do all the forecasting I'm going to talk about today, there's only really two pieces of data that you need. The first is the date at which you start something, and the second is the date at which you finish something. If you track nothing else, this is your first takeaway from this presentation. There are going to be a lot of takeaways, I promise. But if you take nothing else from this presentation, it's track these two things: the date at which something starts and the date at which something finishes. Everything that we're going to do is going to flow from that. Believe it or not, that's all the data you need to be able to answer that question. When will it be done? As probably should be obvious, though, the answer to that, just like the Monty Hall problem, the answer to that question, when will it be done, is going to require us to make a forecast. Right? So let's talk about how we make forecasts. It's a bit cliched, but when I talk about forecasting, one of my favorite things to talk about is weather forecasting. Usually because it's one of the things that most of us are familiar with. So I want to talk a little bit about weather forecasting. I want to talk specifically about hurricane forecasting. Um, I don't know if it was mentioned or not, but I actually flew up here. Yes, I intentionally flew up here from South Florida. I left 85-degree weather, which is what, 30 or so some degree weather, to come to enjoy winter in Montreal with you fine folk. But anyway, I've been in South Florida for a little over 3 years, and this year I actually experienced my first hurricane, my first real hurricane. Some of you guys may have heard on the news about some of the hurricanes that were hitting Florida. Luckily for us, luckily for Florida anyway, we really didn't. It wasn't as bad as maybe what you guys might have heard. It really wasn't that bad. There were some islands in the Caribbean that took it much worse than we did, but in Florida, it really wasn't that bad. But here's the deal. I mean, the geography of the United States is really rather unique because, as you guys probably know, um, in the southern Atlantic between the equator, and I want to say it's the Tropic of Cancer. Any good geography people out there? I think it's the Tropic of Cancer. Uh, there's usually a lot of storm activity in that part of the world, right? And usually between June 1st to December 1st, storms that form in that part of the world track to the west and to the north according to the prevailing winds there. And as they track, they usually grow into these bigger storms, these bigger, more serious storms that we call hurricanes. Right? Now, the United States, unfortunately, like I said, because of its geography, the United States, as you can see, lies to the west and to the north of that storm activity area. So whenever one of these storms form, there's a really good chance that that storm is going to hit the U.S. As a matter of fact, as a point of reference, that's where I live. So as you can imagine, the U.S. invests a lot of time and money in tracking these storms when they form and trying to predict, are these storms going to grow into hurricanes? And if they grow into hurricanes, are they going to strike the United States? Okay, so this is a picture from my backyard. Like I said, I mean, it probably looks worse than it is. This is what happened in our storm. But honestly, this is all the damage we had was we had a tree down and a fence down when a hurricane came through. Like I said, it's not that big a deal. I want to actually tell the story of another storm that was a much bigger deal. And this was a storm that formed on October 22nd, 2012. This storm formed in the southern Caribbean about 5 years ago. It grew. Oops. It grew to. Well, let me just start with this. When these storms form, we have an organization in the United States called the National Hurricane Center. And I think I referred to it as the NHS in all the slides, but that's actually the NHC, the National Hurricane Center. And when these storms form, they put out these maps here. Has anyone seen this map? before? Right? We're going to talk a lot about these maps here in a second, but when the storm first formed, it was so early that it didn't even have a name. You guys know that we name all of our storms, but it was so early it didn't even have a name. It was called Tropical Depression 18. So the National Hurricane Center um, put out this. They tracked that storm. They put this out, and um, that storm that they started tracking on October 22nd actually grew to become the largest hurricane ever recorded in the North Atlantic by diameter, anyway, as measured by diameter. Does anybody, and this storm actually affected parts of Quebec too. Does anybody remember the name of that storm? It wasn't Katrina. I think I heard it. It was Hurricane Sandy. So this is Hurricane Sandy, and Hurricane Sandy, as I mentioned before, was the largest hurricane ever. It was the second costliest hurricane in U.S. history. So largest ever, second costliest ever. It affected 24 states, and yes, parts of Canada. 24 states, with Pennsylvania, New York, and New Jersey bearing the brunt of the damages. Usually when storms hit the U.S., it only affects one or two states, but this one affected actually 24 states and parts of Canada. The other surprising fact about Sandy, well, there's two surprising facts. Would you have predicted any of that when you looked at this chart right here? I'm guessing probably not. I'm hoping not. But the other kind of interesting thing about Sandy was there was surprisingly little loss of life. In fact, I think there were only 11. I mean, any loss of life is tragic, of course, but with a storm like that, with those types of statistics, you would expect there to be a lot more loss of life. I think there was only 11 people who actually died as directly attributed to the storm. So the question is, what does the National Hurricane Center, not the NHS, not the National Health Service, what does the National Hurricane Center know that we don't? What's going on in this picture? For those of you who've seen this before, maybe those of you who haven't, what do you see in this picture? What is your eye immediately drawn to as you look at this picture? What's getting bigger? The white stuff, that cone. Yeah, so what about the cone? Does anybody know what that cone represents? I'm hearing some of it. The secret is actually right there on the chart. Now, I don't know if your eyes are good enough to read that, so I'm going to blow it up for you. But the National Hurricane Center actually puts right on these charts what's going on here. That cone represents the probable path of the storm center. It's a probable path of the storm center. It doesn't represent the size of the storm. So there could be dangerous conditions that occur outside of that cone. Oops, and I just gave you the answer. Does anybody know, who didn't see that slide that I just transitioned to, does anybody know when they say probable, what probability they're talking about? Anybody see? Did everybody see? Yeah. Actually, what they're tracking is the 60 to 70% certainty. This is where the probable path of the storm center is going to go. So they're saying, as we go forward, between 60 and 70% of the time, that storm center is going to track within that cone. So the question I want to ask you is, why not 100%? Why can't they tell me with 100% certainty where that storm is going to go? Yeah, because to get to 100% certainty, right, that cone would essentially be Earth, right? Why can't they give us 100% certainty? What are some things that go on why they can't give us 100% certainty? What makes this forecasting uncertain? I'm hearing lots of stuff. So yeah, so I mean, it's like winds could change. There could be other storms in the area. The temperature of the water could change. There are all types of things. There are all types of variables that go into making that hurricane forecast. And the fact that they can get it to 60 to 70% is actually pretty impressive. But they can't get to 100%. The point here is that weather forecasting is uncertain, so therefore you can't think deterministically. We got to throw that 100% stuff out the window. You can't think deterministically, you have to think probabilistically. And thinking probabilistically is actually a little bit uncomfortable, but the essence of thinking probabilistically that I need you guys to understand, the essence of thinking probabilistically is really just acknowledging that there's more than one possible outcome. So when you guys are working on your project and we're trying to project out how long it's going to take us to get that project done, there is more than one possible outcome. It could get done tomorrow, it could get done in 2 days, 2 months, 2 years, whatever. There's more than one possible outcome, and so we need to start thinking probabilistically about those possible outcomes. They actually do this at the National Hurricane Center, and they run several models, and you can see these are the models that they ran for Sandy, and each one of those lines represents a projected path. And from all of those projected paths, from all of those models that they run in all those projected paths, that's how they come up with a cone. It says, you know, we got a 60 to 70% chance that the storm path is going to go this way. Here's another example of that. I don't know, maybe you guys have seen some of these charts before, but that's what's going on behind the scenes when you see the National Hurricane Center putting out these forecasts. Okay, all right. Was this the only forecast that the National Hurricane Center made? Did they say, you know, on October 22nd, look, there's this storm here. Here's your forecast. Thank you very much. Good night, everybody. I'm done. Is that the only forecast they made? Do you guys know? Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, when the National Hurricane Center starts tracking storms, they update their forecast fairly frequently. First, it's like every 8 hours, and then it's every 5 hours, and then it's every 3 hours, and then it's every 1 hour. As the storms maybe look like they're tracking closer and closer to the U.S., they increase the frequency with which they're producing that forecast. This is the second forecast that the National Hurricane Center put out. This is now on Tuesday, October 23rd, so this is exactly 24 hours after that first one. And the question is, what if the National Hurricane Center put this out and then they just stopped there? What if you lived in New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania? How would you feel if you saw this forecast and you lived in one of those states? What would you think? How would you feel? I feel pretty good. Look, it looks like that storm is kind of heading off into the North Atlantic. It looks like it's spinning away from the United States. Not only is it spinning away, but it looks like it's actually going to get weaker, right? No problem, right? A week later, this is what Sandy looked like. Right? Can't see New York, New Jersey, or Pennsylvania in this picture, can you? Right. That's what the hurricane looked like. So the National Hurricane Center updates their forecasts constantly as they get new information. This is one of my favorite slides that I like to show on this thing, because you can see this is a time-lapse view of all the forecasts that the National Hurricane Center made for Sandy, and you can see how they're adjusting that track as they get more information. It's rather fascinating. We could probably spend the rest of the hour or 45 minutes looking at that, but we have to get off of that. What else is going on in this picture? So we talked about the cone. There's a 60 to 70% probability that that's where the path is going. We talked about how they update that cone whenever they get new information. What else is going on in here? What about the time frame? How far out are they predicting? Yeah, just 2, 3, 4 days. Why aren't they? Remember, I said in a week this thing became the largest hurricane ever. Why didn't they project out a week? Why didn't they project out 2 weeks? Why didn't they project out 2 months? Why not? Because again, the cone would essentially have to be Earth at that point, right? If they were trying, because there's so much uncertainty, they'd have to widen that cone so much. So this is really rather the point. Hopefully, guys, you can see where I'm going with this. These are some basic principles of forecasting. You have to think probabilistically and not deterministically. This is a checklist for you guys to see this if you're doing this with your projects, right? Think probabilistically, not deterministically. You have to update your forecast when you get new information, and shorter-term forecasts are better than longer-term ones, right? These are some very, very basic fundamental principles of forecasting. So I know that it's all about you guys. I get it. I know it's all about you. So let's talk about how we can apply some of these things, some of these principles to how you work. So principle number 1, let's think probabilistically and not deterministically. What do we need to think probabilistically about? What is that question that we're trying to answer? When will it be done? That's the question. So when we communicate the answer to when will it be done, it has to be in a probabilistic form, right? Remember I mentioned that thinking probabilistically means acknowledging there's more than one possible outcome. So let's test your skills at this. As a real world example, let's say that we've started a project and we have completed 12 stories in 1 week. We have 120 stories left in our backlog for this project. Based on that information, when is the project going to be complete? Traditionally, how would we answer that question? 10 weeks. Traditionally, that's how we would answer the question. We would say, well, we got 120 stories. We're getting 12 stories done a week. Obviously, it's going to be done in 12 weeks, right? There are at least two problems with the 10-week answer. The first one is, and this is homework for you guys. I'm going to give you guys homework as we go along. I don't know if you knew this or not, but I'm going to give you guys homework. The first reason that that 10-week problem, that 10-week answer is a problem, is you're going to have to read the book called The Flaw of Averages. If you guys read, I'm going to show you a couple books at the end, really that you really should be reading on this stuff. But other than those books, this is the book that you really should be reading about forecasting, The Flaw of Averages. That 10-week answer is essentially an average. We're coming up with an average result. One of the premises of the flaw of averages is that plans based on average fail on average. You essentially, if you're basing all of your forecasts on average, you have an average chance that you are going to fail. Kind of make you wonder why you're failing so much on your forecasts, huh? The second reason why we don't like averages is because, what did we learn from this picture? What's wrong with the average? First principle of forecasting? There's no probability associated with it, right? What are our chances of that average coming true? Is it really 50%? Is it less than 50%? Is it more than 50%? There's no probability associated with that average. If we tell our customers 10 weeks, if the answer to that question is 10 weeks, what do you think our customers are thinking? That it's going to be exactly 10 weeks. That when that project is going to be done, we have 100% certainty that that project is going to be done in 10 weeks. Remember, that's not how we do forecasting. So all forecasts should really contain two parts, a range and a probability. Right, when we're communicating our forecast, we have to know what are the range of possible outcomes that we're talking about and what is the probability of those outcomes coming true. So this is where it gets, we get back to really kind of the most important question. So if I tell you that all forecasts should contain a range and a probability, what's the next question that you want to answer, that you want to ask? How do we get that range and a probability, right? Well, actually, that's the wrong question to ask. The real question to ask is, what does a 19th century Yorkshire cotton industrialist have to do with the Manhattan Project? That's the real question we want to ask. Did anybody Google this? Anybody look it up? No? The answer to that question is Monte Carlo. Ah, of course, Monte Carlo. Yes, why didn't I think of that? Monte Carlo, right? The way that we are going to come up with a range and a probability is going to be do something called a Monte Carlo simulation. Now, I know that sounds really, really scary, but it's actually really, really, really easy, right? And so this is where we're going to need to go from Monty Hall to Monte Carlo. So Todd, if you can switch back to the website, please. We're going to go back, right? Not that one. Go back to the Monty Hall website, please. Yeah, there you go. Remember, we chose door number 3. And we're now trying to decide, and let's make a deal part of this, whether we need to go to door number 2 or door number 1. Okay? This is what we need to decide. Does anybody want to change their answer based on what I've just talked about? A couple people, maybe yes, maybe no. A couple people, yeah. All right. What if we were really, 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 really bad at math and couldn't figure the probability of what the winning strategy is? What would be one way to figure this out? Play this game over and over and over and over and over again and track the results and see just over time what the winning strategy is. Well, that's exactly what this website does. So we picked door number 2. And the majority of the people in the room said that we were going to stick with door number 2, so that's exactly what we're going to do. So Todd, if you could click on door number 2 again, and unfortunately we lost. We lost. But you can see, if you look at the bottom of that chart, the switched versus doesn't switch, that versus didn't switch, by almost 2 to 1, the better strategy is to switch. When Monte Hall gives us that new information, the better strategy is actually to switch. Now, what was interesting was by almost 2 to 1 in the room, people said we should stay, which is really kind of fascinating to me. I'm not sure if that's really happened before. But the lesson here, though, is we can't trust our intuition on this stuff. We have to resort to these types of things. But it's really, really easy to figure it out. Just play it over and over and over again, and figure what and just calculate what the results tell us. That's essentially all Monte Carlo simulation is. That's it. So when I say we want to use Monte Carlo simulation on your projects, what we're really going to do is we're just going to run the project over and over and over and over and over and over and over again and see what those results are, and then be able to interpret those results probabilistically. The way we're going to do that, Todd, if you can, just very quickly, I want to show you guys. I don't want to get into the mechanics of Monte Carlo, but I just want to show you just how technically it works. This chart that you're looking at, I know it looks kind of noisy, but this chart you're looking at is an example historical throughput of a given team working on a given project. So each dot represents a day where throughput, a day and how many items they got done on that day. So for example, it's kind of hard to see, but on October 7th, 2017, this team got 7 items done. On October 8th, they got 6 items done. If you go all the way back to the beginning of the project, you can see there's some of those zeros down there too. On September 16th, they got 0 things done. So this is the historical throughput of the team's project. What we can do is we can feed this historical throughput into a Monte Carlo simulation, simulate our project over and over and over again to find out what our chances are of that project being done. So the way we're going to do that is, if we click on histogram there, yeah, we can take all that throughput, and by running 10,000 simulations, we can see this is our probability. This is our probability of being done. So what we're saying is, on the sidebar there, I know this is kind of hard to read, but on the sidebar there, we're saying, assuming we have 100 items in our backlog, and assuming that this is the throughput of our historical throughput of our team, this histogram right here represents the results of us being able to get stuff done. And we can look at this probabilistically, and what these results tell us is that with 95% confidence, we'll say that we can get this project done on or before January 18th, 2018. With an 85% chance, we can get done on January 12th, 2018. So really what it comes down to is, how much risk are we willing to live with? As we simulate this stuff out, how much risk are we willing to live with? And that's the date that we will communicate to our customers. Does that make sense? So it's a Monte Carlo simulation. Customers actually don't want to look at this stuff. They don't want to look at this. They want to look at a calendar. They're like, show me a calendar. Let me see for myself what that looks like. So, and Todd, if you can turn off some of those other charts, please, so we can get the histogram too, please. No. The histogram. Histogram, and there you go. So this is a calendar representation of that results histogram that you just saw. And what it's showing you is any of those dates in the red, that stuff has a less than 50% chance of happening. Those dates have a 50% chance of that happening. Anything in the dark green has a 95% chance or better of that happening. So if our customer comes to us and says, you know what, we really need this project by January 1st, we can say, well, you know, there's a chance of that happening, but there's only Todd, if you hover over January 1st, there's only a 29% chance of that happening. Is that a bet that you're willing to place? If the answer to that is no, and my guess is the answer to that is no, now we need to start talking about some other things.